All right. Let's see. Okay, good. Just making sure everything's working. Hey, everybody. My name is Nathan Smith, and I'm the Digital Programming Coordinator here at the Central Arkansas Library System. Thanks for joining me for Excel Part 2. Glad to have you here. If you missed Part 1, or if you have a little previous experience with Excel and you decided you probably didn't need Part 1, then that is totally fine. A lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about, it's not going to build so directly on what we did last week. And definitely, if you have some familiarity with Excel, you're going to be able to sort of dig right into most of what we're talking today. And so I'm excited to get into it. Obviously, this is a 4-part course, and so please feel free and invited to come for next week and the week after. Next week we'll be talking about, let's see. Next week we'll be doing some things with, you know what? I've slept since since I made the schedule, so next week, next week we'll cover some. Let me look really quick. We'll cover some really useful tools, particularly things to help you manage your data and keep it a little cleaner and more readable, and make it look better and things like that. So all of that stuff really, really useful. Definitely encourage you to attend there. And then in Part 4, the grand finale, we're going to be talking about pivot tables and pivot charts, which sound really scary. And even folks who have some familiarity with Excel, sometimes if you tell them, oh, I know how to use a pivot table, they'll kind of look at you like you're a wizard, which is pretty fun. And that's a good reason to show up for Part 4. But also, I mean, it's just a really useful tool. So definitely come on down, and we'll dig into that stuff next week. For this week, though, a couple of other quick preliminary things to get out of the way. As always, we've got a ton of cool events coming up here at CALS. If you head to cals.org, move your mouse over events and click on find an event online to see all the events, or click on technology classes in the menu to see the technology classes. Then you'll be able to see what else is going on, and it's pretty great. We're gearing up for Summer Reading Club, and there's going to be a lot of cool stuff for everyone of every age, so some very exciting stuff coming down the pike there. The other big thing is just to make sure you know, if you have any questions at any point, please let me know what those questions are as soon as you have them. The way you ask your questions, if you're joining me here live in Zoom, all you need to do is go down to the bottom of your Zoom window, click on the little speech bubble that says chat, type in your question and press enter or return if you're on a Mac. And that will get your questions straight to me. So I'll see it and I'll be able to respond to it. So send me those questions if you have them. If you're on Zoom on a mobile device, tap the middle of the screen, look for the More button in the corner of the screen, tap on that, tap chat there, type in your question and send it on, and I'll see it there. If you are joining me via live stream, either on Facebook or YouTube, on Facebook, what you'll want to do is just use the comments like you would on any other post on all of Facebook, and I will see that. And if you are on YouTube, you'll want to look to my right, or well, to your right, I guess, and find the live chat and use that feature to ask your questions there. Wherever you ask your questions does not matter. I will see them and I will be able to respond to them. And I definitely want to. The point of a technology class is for y'all to learn useful things about technology. So if you're learning something about technology that's helping you, then it's a great class. If I'm covering all the points in my outline and, dotting every I and crossing every T, but y'all are not following me and you're not learning anything useful, then there are other more productive things we can be doing. So I definitely encourage you, ask those questions. I'm not worried about interruptions. I'm not worried about whether it's a silly question or any of that kind of stuff. I'm much more worried about making sure that you understand what's going on in the class, that you're able to follow, and that you come away having gotten some really useful information. Finally, if there are technical difficulties, please let me know through all of the same means that I just mentioned, in the chat, in Zoom, in the live chat on YouTube, or in the comments on Facebook. And that way I can make sure and fix those technical problems as quickly as possible so that we lose as little time as possible. Haven't had as much of that lately, knock on wood, but you never know. Oh, speaking of knocking on wood, they're renovating across the hall over in youth services. So if you hear some clinking and clanking or a drill in the background or something like that, it shouldn't be anything too ear shattering, but just know that's what that noise is. And that's it. Let's go ahead and dive in for part 2 here. I'm gonna fire up the screen share and get it rolling. So, let me go ahead and share one last time in the chat and comments and so forth, the link. I want to make sure that you're able to download, if you want, download the example files so that that way, or the example file in the handout, I should say, you know, if you want to follow along. If you aren't too interested in following along, or you just want to watch right now and follow along later with the recording, maybe, perfectly fine too. I am, you know, that's that's not going to hurt my feelings. It's whatever helps you learn best and focus on what's going on. But they're in the chat, and in the you know, they're in the chat. You should find that that link. Let's see. It did not go through to Facebook. Let me. Oh, okay, that's weird. Well, we're going to have to do it in the old web browser. Okay, whatever. There we go. Okay, the link is in the chat and comments everywhere. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and do this. So we are kind of picking up where we left off from last week. Last week, we just started talking about formulas, and we did a couple of very, very basic formulas just to get the ball rolling. For those of you who don't have a lot of experience or no experience with formulas, please don't worry. It's something that, you know, it's something that might seem a little overwhelming at first, kind of like all of Excel, really. But honestly, it's an incredibly useful set of tools to have at your disposal. And it's not as bad as it looks. Let me show you. So, okay, so we did our first couple. Let me go ahead and refresh your memory on that last formula that we did at the end of last week's session. So here in cell C2, I'm going to click there. And personally, I think I mentioned this last week, but I always like to just say it to be sure. Personally, whenever I write a formula in Excel, I tend to select the cell that I want. So I just click with the left mouse button, or that's what I did in this case. You can also use your arrow keys. So I tend to select the cell that I want and then click in the formula bar to type up here at the top to type my formulas there, because it's easier and more foolproof to go back and correct the mistakes that you will inevitably make when typing your formula, because you are human and so am I. And so, you know, when I make a mistake, it's easier to fix up here in the formula bar rather than down here in the body of the sheet. That's an extra click, and I don't always do it, but I tend to do it, particularly if I know I'm going to write a more involved formula. So I've got my little cursor blinking up here, and I'm going to start typing in my formula. Every formula in Excel starts with an equal sign. The equal sign is, the equal sign tells Excel, okay, a formula is coming. If you write a great formula, but you don't start it with an equal sign, Excel is not going to consider that a formula, even if otherwise it was perfect. On the other hand, if you write something else, but you start it with an equal sign, then Excel is going to try to parse it as a formula, and it may not work so well. So always start a formula with an equal sign, never start anything else with an equal sign. Okay, so I've got my equal sign there. Then I'm going to type the word sum, S-U-M, not as in some chickens, but as in sum, the answer to an addition problem. There are different ways to do this. I'm going to show you one that's useful for how we're going to be learning through the rest of the course, but we'll talk about kind of some different options a little bit later. Okay, so I'm going to put the word sum. Then I'm going to open a set of parentheses. So I'm going to hold Shift while pressing 9 on my keyboard, and that is going to give me a left parenthesis right here. Then in between the left parenthesis and our future right parenthesis, I'm going to put some values, some information, some pointers. In actuality, in Excel terms, what I'm going to put in here is what we call an argument. So the word sum here with a set of parentheses next to it is what we call a function. Functions are kind of the building blocks of formulas in Excel. Or another way I like to think about it is functions are tricks that Excel already knows how to do, and you can just tell it to do those tricks. So you don't have to describe it. For example, or a similar thing, if you have a dog, maybe they know how to sit, stay, roll over. And so you just say Rover sit, and Rover sits, right? Excel's the same way. If you say Excel, calculate an average, then it's going to do it, as long as you tell it in the right way. And so this, and that is a function, which I'll show you a little bit later. This function is the sum function, and as you might imagine, it adds stuff together. So so what I need to do, obviously I've said Excel add. Now I need to tell it what I want it to add, because otherwise it's like, add what? So after my left parenthesis here, I'm going to write C4 colon C100. And you'll notice C4 colon C100 color codes in blue here. And further down, you'll see I actually have some blue color coding in the body of my sheet there. That shows me, okay, you're actually pointing the formula to the right cells, assuming that the cells that are color coded are the ones that I intended to reference. So C4 to C100, C4 colon C100 like that is, if you recall, what we refer to as a range of cells. And a range is basically a group of cells that are together with no gaps in between, either a rectangle of cells or a line of cells, vertically or horizontally. So we have our range there, C4 to C100. Now what I'm going to do is hold Shift again and press 0 to create my right parenthesis here. Whenever you have a left parenthesis in Excel, you got to have a right parenthesis as well. You can't have one without the other. So anytime you've got them, you've got to make sure they're a pair like that. So I have equal sign sum, and then in parentheses C4 colon C100, or what I'd usually just say is C4 to C100. When I press enter on my keyboard, or click somewhere else in another cell, or click the check mark right here, or whatever, I get $28,727.68. That's the total of all of these income numbers in my sheet here. So a couple of things to mention about this formula before we move on and do some other formula related things. One of those is I put the formula at the top here. There are a couple of reasons for that, and they're related to the other sort of question that I'm going to address here. So one reason I did that is just simple convenience. If you have a sheet of paper and you're doing some calculations on a sheet of paper, you're probably going to end up with the total or the, the summary of it at the bottom of the page. But because of the way Excel works, the bottom of our sheet is thousands and thousands of rows down. And if you're putting it at the bottom right, my goodness, you could be sitting there all day just scrolling down and scrolling right. I don't want that for you, and I don't want that for me. So I put my formulas like this that calculate things like totals at the top, generally speaking. So that way I don't have to scroll anywhere in order to get to them. Another thing that I've got is, another reason that this is up top is because I might want to add more rows of data a little later on. So if I add more salespeople to my little informal business here, then I might put their name and a date that they checked in with me, and then their income number and their expense number here. Say I add 5 additional people and I have their data to put in. Well, if my formula is right here on row 30, then I've got to move that down. And depending on the situation, I might even have to go in and correct the formula to account for those additional cells with data in them. And again, I don't want to have to do that. So I put this at the top, and I also put wrote my formula in such a way that it accounts for all of these rows all the way down to row 100. So anything I put in any of these cells is going to automatically be calculated in. If I add, say, $2,000 right here, my total automatically updates to $30,727.68. If I remove something, remove it, it goes back to the way it was. So that's why that's there, and that's why this formula is written this way, C4 to C100 rather than C4 to C29. Because if I had only C4 to C29, if I added additional rows of data, I would have to rewrite the formula to accommodate, and say like C4 to C34 or whatever. Hang on just a moment. I see a chat message here. Let me take a look if my computer will work with me. Hey, there we go. Okay. Someone said, did you say we put exclamation point after sum? No. It's a parenthesis. It's kind of, let me switch my screen around a little bit. Give me just a sec, and that way you can hopefully see a little bit better. So it's a left parenthesis between the word sum and C4 up there. Just a moment. Okay, cool. All right, so hopefully that'll work a little bit better. Everybody will be able to see somewhat better what's going on. So yeah, it's C4, or it's the word sum, S-U-M, and then a left parenthesis, so shift 9. And then over here, it's a right parenthesis after the 100. Let's actually see, okay, that's fine. All right, so yeah, let me know if that works. Hopefully it will. There we go. Get my chat window back. Okay, cool. Thank you for bearing with me. Hopefully that arrangement will work a little bit better, and folks will be able to see a little bit better what's going on with the formulas. Okay, so we've got that here, the sum of C4 to C100. Then, and so now let's go ahead and write a second version of the formula that will allow us to, calculate our total expenses. Someone asked about this toward the end of last week's session. So let's talk about that. Okay, so I'm going to click in cell D2 here, click in the formula bar at the top, hit my equal sign again to tell Excel to expect a formula, type the word sum, once again, S-U-M, open a set of parentheses. So I'm going to hold Shift 9, hold Shift and press 9, I should say. And then inside of my parentheses this time, I'm going to go D, as in dog, 4, colon, D, 100. And again, that's going to color code all of those cells from D4 down to D100, so I know exactly which ones my formula is pointing to. And then I'm going to hold Shift while pressing 0 and close that set of parentheses. So I have equal sign, the word sum, left parenthesis, D4 colon D100, and then the right parenthesis. I'll press enter, and our total expense number is $18,896.13. So now we can get to the real meat of it, which is let's figure out our net total. Let's figure out how much we're ahead or behind in terms of the money flowing in and out of our business here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click in cell E2 here. And this time I'm going to do things a little bit, I'm going to do something similar, a little bit different, that opens up, actually, you know what? Let's leave that for now. Let's talk about some other stuff and let's circle back to this because there are a couple of different ways to do this. And I actually think might work better to show you some of this other stuff first. Okay, let's put some random numbers. Y'all don't have to have the same numbers as me when you do this, but I'm going to put some random numbers on my sheet here, and we're going to do some other basic math stuff. So let's see. Okay, great. Okay, so and someone's asking to see the formula there in D2 again. So it's right up here, equal sign, the word sum, open your parentheses, so left parenthesis, Shift 9 on your keyboard, D4 colon D100. So it color codes these cells, and then close your parentheses, so Shift 0 on your keyboard. Cool. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you some more basic math formulas and also show you, first, I'm going to show you a little bit more about how the sum function works because it's so, because you can do several different types of things with it. So I'm going to click in a cell, a couple up from my, again, you don't have to put the same numbers. You don't even have to put them in the same cells. But this is just going to be practice with some of these basic math formulas. So I'm going to click on a cell, maybe a couple above this, just to give a little gap so that I don't mix up the cell with the formula with the cell that has the raw numbers in it. I'm going to click in my formula bar again, hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula, type the word sum, S-U-M, open my set of parentheses. And then there are a few different things we could do here. So if we did it kind of similarly to how we've been doing things so far, then we might say I ate, colon, to indicate a range. And then I16, that's going to give us the cells that have the numbers in them. I'll close my parentheses, so shift to 0, press enter on my keyboard, and now I've got 204. So that's the grand total of all of these numbers added together. Obviously, if you have different numbers, you'll have a different total here. Let's say though that instead of just adding all of these together, I only want to add together the single digit numbers. If I'm going to do that, I'm going to have to write my formula slightly differently. The way that'll work is I'll make sure the cell is still selected, click in the formula bar up here, and I'll just go backspace a few times until I get I8. I8 is one of the cells that has a single digit number in it, so I can leave that one. Then instead of the colon, I'm going to put a comma. What that does is something a little bit different. So the reason we have the colon is it indicates, as I mentioned, a range of cells. So a group of cells with no gaps in between, either a line or a rectangle. But other than a range, really inside of this sum function, I can really only put either a number or a set of numbers. So in the case of a range, I've got a set of numbers, all the numbers that are in that group of cells. In this case, though, I'm pointing to one number, and then I'm going to say, okay, and also this one. So I'm actually adding a second, as I mentioned before, argument, a second piece of information that I want Excel to take into account when it's doing this calculation. And those arguments inside of the parentheses are separated from each other by commas. And you'll see this more and more as we go through, particularly during today's session. But the arguments are separated from each other by commas. So far we've only used one argument in our sum functions. So we had C2 to C100 here, and we had D2 to D100 here. That's a bunch of cells, but it's only one argument. It's a range of cells. In this, we're actually going to have more than one. So our second argument is I10, which has the number 8 in it again. I'll put another comma after I10, and I'll use I14, I'm going to say, yep, which has the 2 in it down here. And each argument is color-coded differently. So the first argument's color-coded blue, the second one's red, and the third one's purple. And I can look at the cells and make sure that I'm pointing to the right ones here. I'll put one more comma and then add I15, and that's color-coded in green. Or I could make this one argument by writing it as a range instead. So I could go I14 colon I15. And now both of those are color-coded together in blue because they are one argument. So now I can close my parentheses. I'll hold shift and press 0 to get a right parenthesis. Press enter or click the check mark or whatever. And 23 is the total of 8 plus 8 plus 2 plus 5. So that's the sum function. You can use it to add in a bunch of different ways. You can also, interestingly, use it to subtract. So let's say that I have, that I'm taking this 76 and I'm going to subtract all those, or no, let's say I want to subtract 76 from the single digit numbers. So it's going to give me a negative number. It's going to be a little easier to see what's going on here. So I've got all of these added together. I'm going to just click up here so I've clicked up here in the formula bar. I'm going to change this formula. I'll just backspace that last parenthesis. I'm going to add a comma. So this is going to be argument number 4. And then I'm going to put a negative sign right here. So a little minus sign. And then I'm going to put I16, which is where the 76 lives. When I close my parentheses, press enter. I forget what the total was before, but anyway, when you subtract 76 from the total of those single digit numbers, it gives you negative 53 right here. So you can use the sum function to subtract. You basically add the negative of that number, which is a little clunky, but sometimes that's the best way to do it. Although there's a sum function for adding, there's no difference function for subtracting. And so that's one way to do subtraction. We'll look at another one in a second here. But let's go ahead and move on to some other basic math functions before we do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's look at the product function, which is very similar to our sum function here. So what I'm going to do, I've got cell I6 selected, but I don't have the cursor blinking here, or I'll hit escape to cancel out. And I'm not editing the cell down here either. I want to make sure that I just have it selected. So it's got a green box around it, but nothing's happening up here and nothing's happening here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to press delete on my keyboard, and that's going to clear out the information that's in this cell. Then I'm going to go up to the top, click in the formula bar, hit my equals sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. And this time I'm going to use the product function. So I'm going to type the word product, P-R-O-D-U-C-T. And if you remember your, say, 4th grade math or so, the product is the answer to a multiplication problem in math. So you can imagine what we're going to do with this. So I'll take the product, so I write the word product, and I'll open a set of parentheses. You have to have a set of parentheses for each of these functions, each of these tricks that Excel knows how to do. So I'll hold shift while pressing 9. That gives me the parentheses. And then I'm gonna, let's say, well, I'll start by multiplying all of these together. So we'll go I8 colon I16. Whoops, I'll close my parentheses, shift 0, press enter, and it gives me a very long number. So let's go back to the single digit numbers again. So I've clicked in the cell. I'm going to click up here at the top in the formula bar, backspace a little bit till I get to I8. So we'll go I8, comma, I10, comma, I14, colon, I15. So that we get a range there. Close my parentheses. And we get 640 when we multiply 8 by 8 by 2 by 5. That makes sense. 2 times 5 is 10, and 8 times 8 is 64. So that all makes sense. So that's the product function. It works almost exactly like the sum function does, except you're multiplying rather than adding. Another useful one to talk about is what's called the quotient function, Q-U-O-T-I-E-N-T. So following our pattern here, the quotient is an answer to a division problem in math. Again, I'm going to select my cell, press delete on my keyboard. Then I'm going to click up here at the top in the formula bar, hit my equal sign, and then type the word quotient. So Q-U-O-T-I-E-N-T. As you're typing, you'll also see it pop up here in a little suggestion box. You can double click on one of these to select it. And I think maybe there's another way. Nope, that's not how it works. Yeah, so you can double click on it to select it. I don't find that particularly convenient, to be honest. I might as well, or I figure you might as well just, just keep typing, but your mileage may vary there. Okay, someone says, what should be typed for product when using Excel for Mac? As far as I know, it should be the same, but let me double check. Okay, yeah, it should be the same. So you'll type the word product and hit left parenthesis. Left parenthesis might be on a different key on a Mac. I'm pretty sure it's not, but theoretically it could be. So you need the word product, left parenthesis, and then whatever you're putting in the middle, and then your right parenthesis. What's it doing when you try to type it in? Let me know if you're still having problems. So the quotient function. So quotient is Quotient. Oh, okay, good. Got it. So quotient is Quotient. You'll open a set of parentheses, and then you'll notice down here, so we've had this little hint system going down here whenever we start using a particular function. It says the name of the function, and then it's got parentheses, and then it has essentially like a little hint that tells you what kind of information you need inside the parentheses, what sort of arguments this function is looking for. Before, it's been number 1, comma, number 2, comma, number 3, and so on. But this time it's actually asking for 2 specific arguments, neither of which is optional. You've got to have both, and that's the numerator and the denominator. By the way, how would I know if it was optional? It'll have square brackets around the name of it in this little hint box. So neither of them are optional. We have to have those, specifically those two things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide. I'm going to do a little bit of division. So I'm going to divide the 76 by 8 here. So I'm going to go I16, comma, and then I8. I'll close my parentheses, press enter, and I get 9. Now that's interesting because 9 times 8 is not 76, it's 72. So what's going on there? Well, the reason that that's happening is this quotient function does division, but it ignores any remainder. And so it doesn't give you a decimal answer, and it doesn't give you information about any remainder. You know, back in the day in 4th grade or so, you'd do division, you'd have the little house, and if you were doing this problem, at the top above the 76, you'd put 9 and then R4. In this case, with the quotient function, it just takes that R4 and gets rid of it, and it gives you the whole number answer to the division problem. Sometimes that's not terribly useful, but sometimes it really is. I mean, if you had a pile of 76 chicken nuggets and you had to divide it up into, into packs of 8, you can only get 9 packs of 8 out of there. You can't, you probably just eat the other ones. You're not going to give someone an 8-pack of nuggets with only 4 in there. So sometimes the quotient function is the best way to divide, but sometimes it's not. Let's say we want a more precise answer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and delete, hit delete on my cell one more time. And this time I'm going to come up to the formula bar, hit my equal sign, and I'm just going to type I16 and then a /. So if you have a number pad on the side of your keyboard, then it'll be over on the right above the 8 key. If you don't have the number pad or you just prefer not to use it, the / is the same key as question mark. So I16 / and then I8. When I press enter, then I get 9.5 as my answer. And of course, half of 8 is 4. So we did get the precise answer to our division problem. And if there were more decimal places needed, it could, it might add them potentially and things like that. but that gives me the precise decimal answer. And you can do basic math this way as well. So so I've got I16 divided by I8. What if I want to multiply? What if I want to multiply 8 by 76? I'll just change the slash to an asterisk. So I'll hold Shift and press 8 on my keyboard, or I'll just use the asterisk key on my number pad. So 8 times 76 is 608. What if I want to subtract? Instead of the asterisk, I'll put a negative sign there. I16 minus I8, like that. 68, 76 minus 8, 68. Great. And then if I want to add them together, I16 and a plus sign, that'll give me 84. 76 plus 8 is indeed 84. So that's another way that you can do math. Basic math, it kind of depends on what you're going for. Particularly as we saw with the quotient function versus using the slash. The slash will give you that precise decimal answer. The quotient function will give you only the whole number answer, no remainder. So both are useful in different situations. Let's talk about one last basic math function. We'll fill in this net total, and then we'll move on to some other types of examples here that are quite a bit different. So let's say that I want to come up with an average of the income number for all of my salespeople over here. In order to do that, I'm going to use, as you might imagine, the average function. Let's see how that works. I'm just going to click in, honestly, any old cell, just because I don't have a space here. Maybe I should put a space here in the future, but whatever. For now, I don't have that, so I'm just going to pick a cell. Then I'm going to click in the formula bar, hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula, and then I'm going to type the word average, A-V-E-R-A-G-E, average. And then I'm going to open a set of parentheses, Shift 9. And then inside the parentheses, again, I'm prompted for number 1, number 2, which is in square brackets, so that tells me it's optional, So number 1, comma, number 2 in square brackets, comma, ... So I could keep adding numbers. In this case, I'm only going to give it one argument. And again, that will be a range of cells, specifically C4 colon C100. Our old friend once again. I'll close my parentheses for the average function. So Shift 0, press enter, and I get $1,104.91. That's the total income number for all of my salespeople here. Now, those of you who recall how averages are calculated might have a question at this point, because I included all those extra cells from cell C30 down to cell C100. So what's the deal with that? Since those cells are blank, you might think they could be considered a 0. And if that's the case, then that's going to affect the average. Thankfully, Excel doesn't do that. It only counts the cells that actually have a value in them. So an empty cell like this doesn't count. In fact, let me show you. I'll put a 0 right here, press enter, and my average goes down. And so you can feel confident in the averages that you get with this function, as long as you've got your numbers filled in, and as long as anything that's a 0, you actually have a 0 in that cell. If you just skipped it for someone who, say, hadn't brought in anything in income yet, then your average would be wrong. And so you would want to make sure you fill in the zeros where you have them, and leave it blank where there should be nothing. In other situations, Excel will count blank cells as 0, so you kind of have to feel that out and just check it to make sure that you're getting the kinds of results that you expect to get. But in this case, for the average function specifically, a blank cell is not the same as 0. And so you don't have to worry about it. Okay, let's sort out this net total up here really quick. with some of the information that we have. Now there's an obvious kind of easier way to do it, which you probably guessed by now. We're not going to do that way first though, because I want to illustrate one other thing before we move on here. Here's what I'm going to do. I've got cell E2 selected. I'm going to click in the formula bar, press my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. And then I'm actually going to use the word sum. Once again, we'll open a sum function. So I'll type sum, open a set of parentheses here. And then inside the parentheses, again, I'm being prompted for number 1, number 2 in square brackets, ... Okay, so this time what we're going to do is we're going to add and subtract our total income and total expenses. Of course, I could type these numbers in verbatim. It would work, but then it's not going to update if I add additional data or if I change things later on. So I need to point specifically to these 2 cells. And so I can go, so what I want to do is go C2, comma, and then minus sign D2. Close my parentheses, press enter, and now we get $9,831.55. Of course, I could even make it simpler. I could erase most of this stuff and just have equal sign C2, negative sign D2, and that'd be it. There's one other way to do it. Let's say that I couldn't use these. Let's say that I want my net total to be calculated independently. Let's say these have some pretty important information in them, and I can't have, or I just don't want these intermediate numbers to be out there. I just want the grand total. I can still do that in just this one cell. What I'm going to do, I'm going to come up here to my formula, click there and backspace. And then inside of my sum function, I'm going to actually add another sum function. So I'm going to type the word sum again and open another set of parentheses. You'll notice this second left parenthesis is red. That way I can color code my sets of parentheses together, which is pretty handy later on, let me tell you. So now inside of this, I'm going to go C4 colon C100. And then I'll close my parentheses there. And that is, well, that's basically the same formula that we typed in cell C2, but now it's inside of a sum function. I'm going to add a comma after my red right parenthesis here. And then I'm going to use the sum function one more time. So I'm going to type sum, S-U-M, one more time, open yet another set of parentheses. And it's red because it's the same level as the other ones. This set of parentheses is going to be inside one other set of parentheses. And inside of this, whoops, I almost forgot the important part here. In front of the word sum, I need a negative sign. So close my parentheses for C4 to C100, and then comma, negative sign, the word sum, and then open a set of parentheses. Inside of that, I'm going D4 colon D100, just like we did in the expenses column over here. Close my parentheses for this sum function and close my parentheses for the original sum function way over here on the left. And so now I have, for each red left parenthesis, I have a red right parenthesis. And for each black left parenthesis, I have a black right parenthesis. When I press enter, again, I get the same net total there, but without any of the intermediary steps being sort of exposed here. So yeah, someone asks, can I do subtotals to compare individual salespersons? Yes, essentially what I would do is a version of this, or honestly, I'd probably just write something like over here in like cell E4, I'd probably just go C4 minus D4 and press enter, and that'll give me there. So Joan's net is, she's $1,265.41 in the hole. And then we'll talk about how to populate that formula to the other rows in the very next example. So thank you for that nice lead in. Let's click over there. Down here at the bottom, I've got this copy, paste, and autofill sheet. I'm going to click there and switch over to our new set of examples here. So, okay, on this sheet, what I'm doing is I'm keeping track of basically a running balance here over the course of a year. So I start in January, I bring in $84 and I spend $54. So I end up with $30 left. And then in February, I bring in an additional $56 and only spend $1. With that total, or with that existing balance from January, I'm up to $85 and so on and so forth. What I want to do here is I want to have this this balance filled all the way down here. Let's look at the formula that's in here. So when I click in D3, I've got the sum of B3 right here. So the February income number, negative C3, so the expense number for February, and then D2, which was my previous balance from January, right? So that gives me my balance for this year. If I want to write a version of this formula on the next row, what I'm going to have to do is basically just change all of these, add 1 to all of these numbers. So I'll go B4, C4, and D3 because I'm now looking at this as my previous balance and these two as my current month, income and outlay. So I could go down and I could rewrite this formula on each and every row, but life is too short for that. So I'm not going to do that. Instead, what I'm going to do is copy and paste this formula down here. To do that, first of all, I need to copy. One way that you can do that is by clicking the copy button up here at the top of the screen. But my personal preference is actually just to use the keyboard. If I hold Control, CTRL at the bottom left of my keyboard, or Command for those of you on a Mac, while pressing C, as in copy, then you'll notice I get this little dotted line here, and this cell has been copied. And now what I can do is come down here. If I wanted it on just this row, I could click this cell and then paste it in. Or what I'm going to do, because I have several rows to do, is I'm just going to select all of these cells with my mouse by dragging. So I'm going to hold down in the middle of this cell and drag down. Make sure you don't drag on this green dot, at least not yet. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, I've got this selected. And now what I want to do is paste it in. Again, up at the top here, I can click this clipboard with a little sheet of paper next to it, and that will paste just fine. But my preference personally is to use the keyboard once again. So on a Windows computer, I'm going to hold Control while pressing V, as in Victor. So Control V. On a Mac, I'm going to use Command V. So I'll hold Control while pressing V, and that's going to paste it in. Now, if you click the word paste down here, then you'll get a bewildering array of options. And unfortunately, I genuinely do regret that we don't have time to get into what all these different paste options do. It's a actually really useful, interesting aspect of Excel. But we just don't have time. Even with 4 classes, we don't have time. And so, if you're looking for further study after the course is over, that is something I definitely commend to you, is those paste options. But the default paste option is what you get if you click the little clipboard, or if you press Control V or Command V on a Mac. And that's what we're going to stick with for this class. Let's take a look at the formulas that we created by pasting this formula up here from cell D3. When I click in D4, you'll notice, interestingly, I said if I had to rewrite the formula for row 4, I would have to add 1 to each of those row numbers. And what do you know? Excel actually did it for us. Down here on row, on row 11, Excel actually added like 9 to each row number, because again, it's down here, 9 rows down. Basically, Excel has an idea, a little inkling of what you're trying to get when you copy and paste a formula somewhere else. What it does is it changes it based on essentially the physical relationship of the cell you copied from to the cell you're copying to. So because this cell, because this cell is one row down from this one, we added 1 to all the row numbers, and we left the column letters the same. Over here, where I have, if I were to paste this elsewhere, like let's say that I pasted it over here in cell E3, it's going to give me a weird result because I haven't rewritten the formula for this. But now you'll notice all of my column letters changed. So so B3 became C3, C3 became D3, and D2 became E2. So wherever you are pasting it in relation to the original cell, that dictates how Excel is going to change the formula. We'll talk about how to avoid that when you need to a little later on. But for now, just want you to know that's the case. And honestly, most of the time, it's super duper helpful. Okay, I'm just going to delete this because that's just getting in our way. So that's copying and pasting formulas. Let me show you something else that's related to this. Over here on the left, I have January, February, and March. And then I just gave up on purpose. But again, I could go in and write April, May, June, but life's too short. I don't want to have to do that because it's a very predictable pattern. And thankfully, Excel doesn't make me. What I'm going to do is select these 3 cells. So I'm going to hold down on January and drag until I get February and March in the selection as well. So I've got all 3 selected. Then I'm going to find this little bitty green dot right here in the corner of my selection, just above where my mouse pointer is right now. The green dot is there. I'm going to hold down my mouse button on the green dot, and I'm going to let go. And now I have filled in my whole year. What this is a function called AutoFill in Excel. And AutoFill basically just takes whatever pattern you throw at it and tries to keep it going. It extrapolates, if you want your $5 computer science word for today. It extrapolates based on the information that you give it. Here's another way that this can happen. I'm going to go over here and do 3, 6, 9. Select these cells. Hold down on the green dot in the corner again and drag it. And now I get counting by 3s. So it goes 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 27, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a really nice way if you have a good, if you have a pattern, rather than going through and trying to enter all that manually, you can just follow it automatically. But let me show you one way that this could go wrong. So I'm going to undo that. And then I'm just going to click the cell that says 9 and drag from here. When I do that, it just gives me 9s, nothing else. And the reason for that is I only had this cell with the 9 selected. And so I'm like, okay, follow the pattern. Here it is. Here's the beginning of it, 9. And Excel's like, that's not really a pattern, that's just 9. And so all it does is fill in 9 over and over again. And sometimes that actually can be what you want as well. If you want the same thing in a bunch of rows, you can just fill it out that way. It's pretty cool. But a lot of times it's not. Most of the time, you kind of want it to follow more of a pattern like this. There's one other really useful thing that AutoFill can do for us. So let me show you. I'm going to go ahead and select these cells where I pasted the formula from D3 before. So I'm going to select those cells, just press delete to clear them all out. And so now we're back to what we had before, at least here in column D. Rather than copying and pasting the formula, what I'm going to do instead this time is I can take the dot, I can select just this one cell with the formula in it, take the dot and drag down. And that's a version of AutoFill that works almost exactly the same as copy and paste. So if you're moving, if you're just copying the, a formula down or to the side than of the cell that it currently exists in, then that's a faster way to do it. In fact, there's an even faster way. I will undo that, and I'll double click the dot, and it actually fills in the whole thing until it reaches the point where, like, oh, there's no data next to me anymore. So it won't go down here, but it'll fill it out so that essentially you have a full list of stuff here. That's called flash fill. So you just double click the dot and it flash fills the rest of it. Okay, someone's asking, how do I delete a block of data, as I just did when I hit delete earlier on a Mac? Let me double check that, because a Mac, it's a little weird since there's a delete key instead of the backspace. Let's see. Okay, so it looks like, okay, here we go. Okay, so looks like on a Mac, most of the time, what you're looking at is hold function while you press delete. Since delete on a Mac is essentially the equivalent of the backspace key on Windows. Hold function while pressing delete, the FN key. And it looks like some versions might do command instead of function. So maybe just try both and let me know which one works. But one of those two should do the trick. Hold down either function or command and press delete. Cool. Any other questions about that stuff before we shift gears? I guess we're not shifting gears so hard. Let's go ahead and if you did have a question, if you're in the middle of typing one, please keep typing it, send it to me, and we'll tackle it. But I'm going to click on the breakout sessions sheet down here at the bottom and switch over to that. So the way that so on this breakout session sheet, we're going to talk about, we saw how helpful it can be on this sheet for Excel to take our formulas and change them, to like add one to the row number down here, or to shift the column letters over one or whatever. And a lot of times that's what you want. Sometimes it's not what you want, and that's what we're going to see in this example here. So I'm planning some sort of professional conference, and in this example, and we've got 4 sort of sessions scheduled here. There's a time management session at 9, computer tips at 10, marketing at 1:30, and an Excel session at 3. Each session is supposed to be 1 hour and 30 minutes long, as indicated over here in cell E3. And so I have a formula here that actually just does that calculation for me. So the formula here in C2 is, cell C2 is the sum of B2, the start time, and E3, the session length right here. Because of the way Excel deals with time and dates, this totally works. It's a little weird. You might not think it would work, but it does. So, so we have 9 a.m. and then we add 1 hour and 30 minutes, basically. And it gives me the correct result. 10:30 a.m., if it's 1.5 hour session, would be the end time. So let's go ahead and just fill this in. So I'm gonna move my mouse over the dot, just like I did before, double click on it, and flash fill my formula in, and wah, 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 no luck. My computer tips session starts at 10 a.m. and ends at 10 a.m. And then marketing, only a minute's worth of marketing. You're not gonna learn much there either. So we have a problem with our formula. When I click on cell C3 here, you'll notice what's gone wrong. When Excel changed my formula to make it work for this row, it changed B2 to B3, which is what we want because the PC tips session starts at 10 a.m., not 9 a.m. But E3 became E4 right here. And it turns out cell E4 is a big old nothing, just a blank cell there. So Excel is taking my 10 a.m. and it's adding nothing or a blank cell or 0, depending on how you want to talk about it. And it's getting 10 a.m. That's a problem for our formula. So what can we do here? Again, I could go through and I could rewrite each version of the formula, but if I had a longer list of stuff, that would not be terribly practical, and it'd be frustrating. So instead of doing that, I'm going to rewrite my original formula and copy it in a way that will actually work. So here's what I'm going to do. I'll click back in cell C2 to get to the original formula. And then here where it says E3, all I'm going to do is click between the E and the 3, like that. If you don't get it just right, you can use your arrow keys to move in between the E and the 3. And I'm just going to put a $sign in front of that 3. E $3. I need everything else in the formula, still need my parentheses, still need the B2 and all that. I'll hit the enter key on my keyboard or return or click the check mark. And now I get the same result here, which this formula is working before. Now I know it's still working, which is a good sign. But I need to know whether it's going to work down here. So what I'm going to do is, again, double click the dot or drag the dot down to autofill. And now we get the right result, 11:30 a.m. That's an hour and 30 minutes from the start time here. And if you look at the formula, you'll notice the B3, that one changed, but the E3, that didn't. The reason for this is by adding a $sign in front of the 3, I made the row number 3 in my original formula what we call an absolute reference. An absolute reference basically just tells Excel, okay, when you're moving stuff around, don't change this particular bit. So putting a $sign in front of the 3 makes that absolute, and it says, Excel, you can change any other part of this formula that you need to. Don't change that 3. Leave it exactly as it is. And that's going to work great for this setup. Now, if I needed to copy and paste the formula somewhere else, like into another column, then I might have an additional problem. So if I copy and then paste it over here, then you'll notice I get F2, which is probably right. I mean, if I had a second set of start times over here, then I could get, well, let's just put one. So I'll put 9 a.m. there as well. And now I still get 9 a.m. there from the formula. F2 is right, but then I3, we have a problem there. So we left our row number as 3. That's great. And that would continue to work even if we copied it down a bunch of rows. Still have I3, but it's I rather than E because I only made the 3 in my original formula absolute. If I want to say actually only cell E3 specifically, no other cell, what I want to do is put a $sign in front of the E as well. So now I have $E, $3, and that's an absolute reference vertically and horizontally. So it points to exactly this cell E3. And if I copy the formula elsewhere, then it does stay E3, just like that. That's really useful, but there is one other way to do this that I like quite a lot. In fact, I find it more helpful and friendlier than what I just did. I definitely wanted to show you these absolute references because in other places in Excel, Excel is going to fill those in for you automatically. And if you saw that and you didn't know about absolute references, then you might be panicking a little and going, what are all these $signs doing in here? This doesn't make any sense. So I definitely wanted you to see that. But if I were doing this for real, I would do something else instead. I'm going to select cell E3 here again. And this time what I'm going to do is come up here to this area called the name box where it actually says E3 at the moment. I'm going to click there and I'm going to change this to, I'm just going to type in the word length like so. Then I'm going to press enter on a PC or return on a Mac. And I get the word length up there in the form or in the name box. If I click anywhere else in any other cell, it just gives me the regular old address of the cell like H7. But if I click here, it gives me length. Now this cell is still E3 because it's still in column E and it's still on row 3. But I've now named the cell length. And so if I come up here to my formula once again in C2, and I just get rid of all of this stuff, the dollar signs, the E, the 3, and I just type the word length in and close my parentheses, press enter, lo and behold, that works as well. So I've named this, now that I've named this cell, I can use the name inside of a formula to refer to that cell and, well, to refer to the information inside the cell, really. And if I autofill this down, then my formulas still work here. In fact, anywhere in this entire workbook, not even just on this breakout sessions sheet, anywhere in this entire Excel file, if I use the word length in a formula, Excel is going to know what I mean is cell E3 on the breakout sessions sheet. And that is really handy, particularly if you're using, if you have information that's interdependent on different sheets. So if you need to have a formula that refers to information that's on a different sheet, it looks really messy to refer to it the way that, in kind of the default way that Excel does, which I'll show you toward the end of like next week's session. But it looks really messy. It's hard to read. And so if you name your cells, or you can even name ranges, which we'll do a little later. If you name your cells, then you can fill in just like a human-friendly name for that cell to point back to the information that you need, even on another sheet in the file. So that's really incredibly useful. And so I wanted to make sure that you saw that. All right. Let's go ahead and shift over to date information. What questions do y'all have for me about any of the stuff we've done so far? Copy and paste and autofill, absolutes, names, before we move on. We'll do a lot more of autofill and copy and paste as we, throughout the remainder of the course. But so you'll get some practice too. Cool. All right. Let's, if you have those questions, if you're typing them now, keep typing them and I'll see it when you send it through and we'll tackle it. Let's go ahead and click over to the date 1 sheet down here. We're gonna have 2 sheets with date examples on them. So here's the first one. In these 2 examples, I'm working as some sort of a freelance contractor and someone says, I fired Rapali after I did autofill on the first page. That seems wise. There's a, so we've got these. So in this example, what I'm doing is I'm working as some sort of a freelance contractor. I've got all these clients over here. I've got the dates I received the assignments from them. I've got a description of what I'm doing for them. And then here in column C, it's empty. I've got a number of days old. So this is how long I've had each assignment, how long it's been outstanding or whatever. So what I want to do is try to prioritize my work so that I can finish the oldest stuff first. And that way get all that old stuff off my plate and feel a little less bogged down, maybe cut my to-do list down a little bit. In order to do that, I want to draw your attention back to something I said last week, just briefly, which is whenever Excel stores dates, so it's going to show them as a date like this. But in actuality, let me put that date over here, just so I use a formula to keep the dates current in those cells, but we don't really need to worry about that. If I put this date here, if I change this over, change the number format to be a plain old number, you're going to get this like serial number like this. The serial number counts from January 1st, 1900 to whatever the date is that happens to be in that cell. So in this case, March 17th of this year was the 44,272nd day from January 1st, 1900. So here in this number of days old, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and calculate how long I've had that assignment, or how long I've had that assignment. And I'm going to use this, because Excel stores these dates as serial numbers, I'm going to be able to just add and subtract dates like I would any other number. So I am going to use kind of my basic math stuff here. So I'll hit the equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula here in cell C2. And then I'm going to use a new function here. And that new function is today. Whoops, always hold that shift for too long. I'm going to type the word today, T-O-D-A-Y, just like you would. I'm going to open a set of parentheses, so shift 9. And I'm going to close a set of parentheses, shift 0, with absolutely nothing, not even a space in between. So today, open a set of parentheses, close the set of parentheses. Oops, I missed something. Hang on. Let's come back to that. I'm going to get rid of that for a moment. I'm going to go B2. Then I'm going to put the negative sign. And then I'm going to go today. Open a set of parentheses, close it. And then I'm going to press enter. When I do that, okay, I was trying to rewrite that formula on the fly. I was trying to be clever. Let's just do this one more time. Okay. Hit my equal sign, negative B2. So we went negative B2, no. Let me just do it. Okay, here we go. The word today. So equal sign, the word today. Open a set of parentheses, close the set of parentheses. Nothing in between. Negative sign, B2. Press enter on my keyboard. And there we have it. 56 is the correct answer. My goodness. There's a slightly different version of this formula that uses a sum function inside the handout. So if you download the handout, that is what you'll see instead of this. And that is why I seemed a little confused for a moment there. I probably should have just stuck with what's in the handout, but alas, I did not. Okay, so I have equal sign, then today, and B2. The today function does almost exactly what you would think it would do. The today function fills in today's date, whatever that happens to be. Now, because your computer has a clock and even a little battery in there to keep the clock going when there's no power to your computer already knows what day it is. So you don't need to put anything in between these parentheses. But because I'm saying use the today function, rather than just trying to type the word today into my formula, I have to put a set of parentheses here. And whenever you have a left parenthesis, you have to have a right parenthesis. That's why this is written the way it is, even though that looks a little awkward. The parentheses tell Excel this is a function, not just not just a word. So I've had the assignment from March 17th, 2021 to today. That was 56 days. If I double click on the little dot to autofill it down, then I can see, oh, this one I just got today. This one we're looking at 258 days. That's a while. So maybe we prioritize this one. In fact, if I want to, I can sort. So I'll come up here to the little drop-down arrow that's already there, and I'll click sort largest to smallest. And that puts the oldest assignments on top and the newest assignments down on the bottom so that I can focus on the things that I need to get done the most. Let's switch over to the date 2 sheet. So I'm going to click on date 2 down there. And now I have kind of the same setup, but this time instead of the date I received an assignment, this time I actually have due dates for my assignment. So I want to know when my client needs this work by. Inside of this, and then here in column C, instead of the number of days I've had the assignment, I actually want to calculate how long I have to work on it, days until due. Now, that could be useful if I calculated just the number of calendar days. If I calculated the number of calendar days, I would use just almost the same formula as I did over here. The only difference is I would take, I would be subtracting the due date or today from the due date rather than the due date from today. And that would give me the number of calendar days I have left. But Excel has another really useful function that I like to use for this kind of thing. And it's called net work days. I used to use this back in an old job where I had a bunch of customer service cases that I had to handle to calculate the number of days I had left to work on it. And that's basically what we're going to do here. So what I'm going to do is I've got cell C2 selected. I'm going to click in the formula bar, hit my equals sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. And then I'm going to type all one word, net work days. Now it's not network days as in like a TV network or something. It's network, or it's net work days. And then I'm going to open a set of parentheses. And now I'm being prompted for 3 arguments, one of which is optional here. The first argument is start date. So this is where we're starting the calculation from. In other words, what's the earlier date that I want to look at? So the earlier date is today because I can't go back in time and start earlier on my assignments. I have to start from today. So I'm going to type today, open my parentheses and close it. Today functions there, and that's our start date. Our end date, of course, is going to be the date the assignment is due. So I'm going to add a comma here to separate the first argument from the second one. You'll notice, by the way, when I add the comma, start date is bold here. When I add the comma, end date turns bold. So it's telling me which argument I'm on exactly, which is pretty handy. So for my end date, I'm going to go B2. That's my due date over there. And then after the comma here in the hint system, there's a third optional argument, and that's holidays. We're not going to use that this time, but I'll tell you what it does in a sec. So instead of filling that in, we're just going to close our parentheses, Shift 0, and I'll press enter on my keyboard. -20, uh-oh, this one's overdue by 20 work days. What this net work days function does is it takes the earlier day and the later day, or your start date and your end date, and it says, how many work days are there between these two? In this case, because this assignment's overdue, it's like, oh, there are work days, or it's a negative number. You're already late on this one. If I autofill this on down to the rest, this one is due in 8 work days or 8 business days. It's due on May 21st. Today is May 12th. So I have 8 work days to finish that up. What it's going to do is just count Monday through Friday. And so assuming that you have a Monday through Friday work schedule, this will calculate it exactly for you, and it'll be great. The holidays argument, if you decide to use that, basically what that does is you can have a set of dates that are holidays for your company or days that you're not going to be working or whatever, like, I don't know, Christmas. And let's say New Year's. And so on and so forth. And then I could, they have to be written out in a column like this, in one column. But I could put a reference to the range. So if I go, comma, I1 colon I2, press enter, it does nothing because those dates aren't between there. If I autofill it down though, I'll probably see a change in a few of these. Oh, but I would have to make it absolute. So anyway, that's what the holidays argument does. Otherwise, it won't skip any holidays or any particular days other than Saturdays and Sundays when it's calculating. All right. Well, let's go ahead. We're getting close on time, but we're almost there. Also, let's switch to our last example, and we'll talk about charts. So, one of the cool things that Excel does is it allows you to create charts out of your data, which is really nice because sometimes you really need a visual in order to be able to see what's going on with your data. And so you can create a ton of different types of charts. We're not going to dig super deeply into that just because there are so many different options. But I do want to show you how that works and explore the chart options on your own and play around with them. So I encourage you to do that if you are interested. So here we are. In this example, we've got our 5 salespeople, and we have their quarterly sales numbers for over the course of 2 years here. I want to turn this into a chart. So what I'm going to do is come up here, hold my mouse button down over cell A1, and drag until I get to cell I6. Make sure that you have your row labels over here and your column headings up here on column 1 or in row 1 selected. Make sure you have all of this selected, but not any of the blank cells before we insert the chart. Okay, got those selected. Pretty easy so far. Let's come up here. I'm going to click on the Insert tab. And I'm going to come down and click on where it says Recommended Charts. When I do that, it gives me recommendations of charts that I might want to use to represent this data. And there are a few interesting options here. For example, the clustered column chart is the top example or the top suggestion that it gives me. So I can see essentially each person's name has a color code associated with it. And for each quarter, I can look at their, I can look at each quarter in each cluster here and see what their numbers were in relation to each other. So that could be pretty useful. There's a stacked column chart where it stacks them, it still color codes them like that, but it stacks them all on top of each other, which gives me a visual of both how everyone did related to each other in a specific quarter, but also how the company overall did from quarter to quarter. Pretty cool. And you've got a similar thing, the clustered bar chart, which is basically the previous thing flipped on its side, and the stacked bar chart, which is this one flipped on its side. Got some other stuff, the funnel, and these don't strike me as being as useful, at least for my purposes. But depending on what you're looking for, these may work. Or you can click the All Charts tab up at the top, and then you get just a whole ton of these. Now, some of these options are not going to be available if you have an older version of Excel. And they're definitely, a lot of them are definitely a little more specialized, the ones that aren't available. So you may not have as many sort of use cases for those. But for what you have, but if you need like a, say, sunburst chart or something, or you want, I don't know, this waterfall or whatever, then great, there it is, you've got it. But there are most of the basic chart types are in almost every version of Excel. If I click on the line chart over here, this is the one I'm looking for. So for each one that I click, you'll notice there are sort of types and subtypes. So I have, looking at the line charts themselves, I've got these two styles of basic line chart. And the difference between these is basically just the configuration. So I have the number of units on the left on both of these, but each sort of stop on the lines here on this left side is a quarter, whereas this one, each person is a stop on the line, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So this is the one that I'm going to use ultimately. But if I want a different format of line chart, I've got stacked line charts, similar to that stacked bar chart or column chart. 100% stacked line chart, line with markers, stacked line with markers, even a 3D one, which is horribly confusing to look at. But I'm going to go straight for the regular the first line chart. I'll click OK. And now here's our lovely chart in the middle of our sheet. So you can, if you want your chart to have its own sheet, you can totally make that happen. The way that works is you click Move Chart up here at the top, and it will give you the option to either create a new sheet for your chart or to move it to another sheet. But I'm going to leave it where it is. By the way, you'll notice up here at the top, while I'm working inside my chart, as long as it's selected. Now, if I click outside the chart, not so much. But as long as the chart's selected, and you'll see the little dots on the edges and in the corners here, you'll see I have two additional tabs up here in the ribbon, the Chart Design tab and the Chart Format tab. In older versions of Excel, this is called the Chart Tools Design tab and the Chart Tools Format tab. But they do the same thing. So the Chart Design tab is basically just changing the design of your chart so you could make it look somewhat different, like just in terms of color scheme. Personally, I'm partial to the laser tag look here. You can switch your rows and columns. You can select data if you left out a row or a column when you were selecting data at the beginning. You can click Select Data and change that, fix it. You can change the chart type altogether. If I'm like, I want a pie chart, then change it. This wouldn't work for a pie chart, I don't think. And so on and so forth. The Format tab up here allows you to change things a little more granularly, change specific colors or specific styles of text. You can actually rename the chart up here, which is separate from the title, weirdly enough. Down here, there's a chart title and there's a chart area name there. If I want to rename or if I want to retitle the chart, I'll click here where it says Chart Title. And then I'll type in a new title. But make sure you don't press Enter when you type in the new title, because otherwise it will move your selection somewhere else. Just click on some other part of the chart once you've typed in the title. Okay, so let's look at our chart a little more closely. I'm going to make it a little bigger so we can see a little better. Okay, cool. We've got our title. We've got our color coding here. So I'm seeing Falana is the orange line, and Egan is the light blue line, and Emir is the dark blue, and so forth. We've got our number of units over here. And each time that the lines sort of bend, that's a quarter. And so we can kind of see the progress of our salespeople as we move from quarter to quarter. I can click the plus sign here and I can change what parts of my chart show up or how they're presented. For example, with axes here, I can uncheck this and that will remove, well, you'll see, that'll remove all these little labels at the bottom and on the corner. If I check it again, they come back. Or I can click the arrow over here and I could just get rid of either one axis or the other. I could add an axis title if I want to. I can add, I can hide the title for the chart if I don't need that. I can add data labels next to each data point, and I can change how they look. So they can be centered on the data point, they can be above it, below it, they could be a call out, which makes it really hard to read, and a whole bunch of other stuff, just depending on what you need exactly. Error bars, if you're doing statistical stuff. You can include a copy of the table if it's not on the same sheet and you want it there handy. Grid lines, the little grid lines in the background, a legend, the little color coding. You can create a trend line. And when you do that, it actually asks you, in this case, it's going to prompt me to pick one of my salespeople to create a trend line for. So let's look at Helen. I'll click OK. And there's Helen's trend line right there. So overall, on average, her sales numbers are trending up from the beginning of year 1 to the end of year 2. And I could add more if I decided to, and change the look of them. And then my up and down bars here and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff you can add here. It just depends on what you're trying to represent. And you can just play around with it. This paintbrush gives you the ability to change the style just like we could at the top in that chart design tab. And then you can also change the color scheme if you want to by clicking this color tab. Finally, let's say that, I don't know. Let's say that Philana is no longer with the company. I'm presenting this to our current sales team, so I don't need her numbers to show up there. I'm going to uncheck the box next to her name here in this funnel button and click apply. And now her data has been hidden. So it's still there if you look at the original cells with the data in them. I haven't lost anything, but my chart only shows the current salespeople. And so that is really helpful. I could also say focus on year 1 rather than year 2. So I'll uncheck these boxes, again, click apply. And now I can see just my year 1 numbers for my current sales staff. If I want to get all that back, I'll just click select all a couple of times until everything's checked, click apply, and there it is, back to normal. If I click the names here, if you have a more complex set of data, you might have to change, you might have to change what's represented where, and you can do that here, but we don't have anything quite that complex that we're working with, so don't worry about that too much, for now at least. If you create a chart and it doesn't look exactly the way you wanted it to look, sometimes you'll have to play around with it a little bit. We're also going to talk in part 4 about pivot charts, which if you're trying to take data and kind of do things like averages or totals and things like that and represent those on a chart, a pivot chart is definitely going to be your bag. So if you can't represent it with the raw data, you might be able to represent it with a pivot chart, just depending on what kind of data it is and how you want it to look. But that is pretty much it. Looks like everybody hung around for the end of the session. I really appreciate that. Sorry we ran a little long today. Hopefully you got a lot of good stuff out of it. Again, that link that I threw in the chat a while back, so it's cals.link/excel-2-files if you want to download the example file to play around with it later. If you want to download the handout, our streaming seems to have gone successfully, unlike last week. So you should be able to find the recording of this session on the CALS YouTube channel and on our Facebook page. So you can watch it back later on, get a little refresher, to next Wednesday morning or whatever. And I hope to see everybody in part 3. Any last questions before we wrap it up? We've got a fan of AutoFill here, and I totally agree. Very helpful. And she says, Antoinette is headed to HR now. She should probably get a raise. So somebody just wanted me to repeat. So if you want to watch if you want to watch this again, you can find it on the CALS YouTube channel. You can get to that from the website, but actually a really convenient way to do that is go to cals.link/YouTube. And that'll get you to our YouTube channel, and you should find it there. Excellent. Well, thank you. Y'all are. I'm so glad y'all are here. This really is a fun. I love teaching this course, so I'm glad y'all are getting stuff out of it and enjoying it as well. Hopefully, I'll see everybody next week. And in the meantime, have a great rest of your day. Bye.